What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of pldViews here on the PLD Projects YouTube channel, my little slice of the YouTube universe. It's me. It's me. It is PLD. How y'all doing today? Well, what do we do on this show? We go over one of my favorite shows of the 80s, V, great sci fi franchise about alien invasion, also a little allegory about fascism and how to resist it, so to speak. I've been going through episodes one by one. I'm going to eventually get into the comic books, the books, anything that has to do with the franchise, any different medium they had. Go through a little bit by bit, give you a little bit of review, a walkthrough, fun bits here and there. And I'm also, what I do is go into the character database, talk about specific characters throughout the franchise, give them a little highlight, so to speak. Um, so far, I've already gone through the miniseries, and we are now into the weekly series, which is where everything kind of went downhill, according to most people. But I'm finding so far that, while it is definitely a guilty pleasure, I finding that I'm seeing what they are trying to do more than I should, I guess, considering that it seems like it's not as bad as I remember, at least so far, but more likely it's that it's I get what they're trying to do. They don't quite have the execution that they used to have, but we'll get into that as we move forward here. What I'm hearing, the weekly series. This is the episode two of the weekly series. The second was a conclusion from the first part, which was the pilot last episode. This episode was called Dreadnaught, and it was written by Stephen E. D'Souza and directed by Paul Krasny. The original air date was November 2nd of 1984. Now, if you remember correctly where we left off, we were kind of on a little bit of a cliffhanger from the episode. Elizabeth Maxwell had been entered into some kind of cocoon, possibly transforming yet again, as we've seen her do already in the final battle. We also saw Diana make her escape after killing Martin, returning to her mother's ships that were all behind the moon, trying to see that we're gonna hope see the aliens come back because the red dust didn't kill her after all. After the antidote had run out, we had she had escaped from Donovan and Ham, Ham Tyler, who was left wondering what was next. That's basically where the gist was. So at the beginning of this episode, we're going to continue right directly from there. Donovan and Ham are at the Southwest Tracking Station, and Donovan's basically saying their regrets about not having taken Diana out. They see some police come up to them, and all of a sudden said they think they're going to go to them and get them help. No, police start shooting at them. Well, the police are being run by Nathan Bates, but we'll get there. So Donovan and Ham are off together on a little adventure trying to escape the so-called law, while Diana is brought back to the mothership, and we meet and introduce for the first time the character of Lydia. Now, Lydia is a stalwart of the series. She becomes a technically technically ally, but actually more of a counteracting of Diana, because as you know, Diana pretty much killed all the people who were against her in the Visitor Army before. John, Pamela, Stephen was dead, and even though Diana didn't kill her, but Pamela was killed by her. John was killed by her. So she had nobody left. It was just basically Diana and the aliens. There was no aliens left to be on the other side. So I think this was a way to the series decided to introduce someone else as a somewhat foil. And actually, she reminds me a lot of Pamela. It's a blonde Pamela, someone who would be close to her in rank, maybe fighting for some power between them, but at the same time, at least initially, Diana is still the head lizard in charge, so to speak. Um, and during the analysis, they discover like Diana wants to go all out again and attack because the red dust hadn't worked. She does so. She launched a full scale invasion everywhere, including LA, and she discovers a secret because your aliens forces are dying in half the places, give or take, and then in some places they're achieving great success. And in one of the, well, I'd say questionable science department, in the questionable science department, we find out that Diana just lays down the map of the world or the map of her landing zones. She lays over the red dust, how the red dust was deployed, and that's all over the entire world. She suddenly just factors in weather patterns, and all of a sudden, this advanced computer just lets it go, and we see that the red dust areas have shrunken, and there's just certain areas where it's warmer temperature, it had dissipated, whereas in the colder temperatures, it is still active. And Diana surmises immediately that it is a bacteria that can only thrive in the cold. Seems like it could make some scientific sense, but at the same time, it was just so quickly happening. It seemed like, okay, let's move this along real quick, right? uh, Definitely, that's part of the series. What happens? It starts getting a lot more sloppy as far as science goes. Not that it was ever, not that it was ever really a hardcore science show, but they don't really care as much in this one. Another thing, I don't know if I mentioned this last episode or not, something that bothered me is part of the budgetary cuts. I know. All of a sudden, the visitor's voice is no longer an issue. They don't have the reverberating voice. The thing was such an issue before, where so much that Ham got resistance some device to wear so they can make the same noise that the visitors make as far as when they try to infiltrate the visitors, so to speak. That has gone with no nothing ever said about why that is. Just all of a sudden they talk just like humans do. But in the meantime, Diana also decides that she's going to go down and confront Nathan Bates, who, of course, had her kidnapped after faking her assassination, held her at hostage to do his bidding. And it's an interesting scenario. It's great seeing Nathan Bates arriving as a character. I actually like the character. It's kind of reminiscent, especially nowadays. It's a businessman who is plotting to take charge, take advantage of the situation. And he has to strike a deal with Diana because Diana introduces a plot device of what I call a pulsometer on his wrist. And the pulsometer is linked to explosives throughout the Nathan Science Frontiers, his business facility, which will lead to tanks of the red dust that he could reintroduce in the atmosphere and kill them all. And Diana knows that she has to get to him before he does that. Otherwise, it's the invasion will once again fail. However, there seems to me still to be kind of a plot hole, to be kind of like what I said during the final battle. It still seems like a temporary thing. Obviously, even more of a temporary thing. They're going to introduce more red dust to the atmosphere, and then they'll get warmer and dissipate again. So it's going to be a never-ending cycle at this point. To a place where since there is an antidote, that Diana should be able to manufacture her own by this point, considering how advanced the race is scientifically. But it makes for an interesting scenario because they end up striking a deal that Los Angeles will be an open city while the rest of the world is at war. At least in the warmer climates, LA would be a place where visitor and human could walk around unmolested, so to speak, as long as they weren't armed. But basically left Bates in charge. Julie, of course, is there working with Bates. She calls him a sellout, basically, but not so much that she ruins her position there, because she obviously realizes that she's in a good position to be in at Nathan Bates' side as far as information goes and to know what's going on. This, of course, creates a little bit of tension between her and Donovan eventually, since that romantic angle is still up for grabs at this point. It seems a little bit forced to me. Donovan would be, Donovan being jealous doesn't seem too bad, but over Nathan Bates, and it seems kind of a little bit of force to me, but got to have their attention somewhere. We're going to turn this into a soap opera. We're going to have that kind of tension. That's what they're trying to do. Meanwhile, though, on the other part of the storyline where Julie is initially, is she's with Robert and Elizabeth. Elizabeth comes out of her cocoon and she's jumped age again. She was looking like she was 8. Now she looks like she's 16, 17, possibly 18 years old. I believe, I don't know this for sure, but I believe this was probably a decision so that they wouldn't have to have the child actor every week. They could have an 18-year-old, even though she still is like 1 or 2 mentally she's 1 or 2 years old, but physically she's now 18. Of course, it's kind of strange. There's no really rhyme or reason of it. We do know she still has her powers. She's telekinesis. So she pushed helicopters away. She did the crazy thing in the mothership where she lit up like a Christmas tree and was able to turn off the nuclear device. So I guess you could say that Diana maybe got involved in the hybrid creation and maybe experimented on Robin pregnancy. Maybe that's how she gets some powers. Otherwise, it's really unexplainable. And as you're going to find out in the series, they really become kind of a deus ex machina quite a bit. Whenever they need something, Elizabeth can suddenly have these new skills, or she uses her powers in a way that makes it easier for the resistance to make it through. But it's interestingly enough, it's interesting watching the development of that. So far, it's not too bad. It gets worse as it goes on. At this point, still okay. What I do like is Elias at the Club Creole is his restaurant is still there, and that's where the resistance decides to come back and reform, so to speak, gives them a base of operations, especially because some, there's a hideout in the basement that Elias built. Why? Because it probably was cool, though it also just serves the plot device. The resistance art automatically have a place where they can go, which is hidden from LA and the rest of the world at this point. Um, Now, the interesting thing here is Nathan's going to announce the treaty on a live TV because that's important, obviously. At this point, the resistance aside, there's an option they can steal the mothership while Bates is busy, while Bates gets his security at this televised signing because they feel like the mothership would be a good thing to have. I mean, I guess I can see that. It seems like such a bold decision for a handful of resistance fighters to try to fly the mothership. Ham, of course, disagrees, and well, he's going to go off half cocked and try to do his own thing, which is in character, so I like that. But at the end of the day, we lose our second resistance member as Elizabeth comes on board because she's going to be needed to do her Jedi mind trick, Jedi powers, and she is. She ends up using her Jedi powers to start the mothership in a way that they couldn't do without her. But during the confrontation, her grandfather Robert Maxwell is shot, and he draws a short straw as the next part of the interesting development. The Dreadnaught, the title Dreadnaught, is coming from the visitor homeworld called in by Diana to use as a way to just decimate Nathan Bates' Los Angeles. That's their big secret. He's going to sign this treaty, and then they're going to destroy her with this what's called the triax, the particle beam triax, which can basically destroy something almost like a nuclear device without the fallout. So that's on its way. But Willie actually gives a great definition when he sees it. It's a great acting by Robert Englund. Showcase how powerful it is. But during this time, mothership gets raised off the ground. Robert shot almost fatally. He's got a short straw. And he decides he will sacrifice himself. And instead of them getting the mothership, they'll use the mothership as a weapon to just ram into the triax. And they end up destroying both. Robert sacrifices his life, being the ultimate zero, as Willie says. Well, it's actually hero, but he does say zero. It's kind of a funny moment for there. Again, that's the weekly series. So that's how it goes. Let's see, get some pictures from here. There's Diana facing Nathan Bates, making herself in command. There's Willie during a fight where Donovan and Ham make it back to the Club Creole to have some visitors in there. Yeah, take care of business, trying to wipe them out. This is where Donovan is deciding after Robert gets shot, trying to decide what to do. Donovan, of course, being the Captain America type, he offers to sacrifice his life and let everybody out, but it makes no sense for that to happen. And there's Diana on the bridge in her television outfit, her new white outfit, which is kind of cool to see. I like that. That's where we are for that. At the end of the episode, it is where we are. The one thing also that comes up during this episode, which is an interesting plot point, or I don't know if interesting is the right word, but Elizabeth has the mark of Zahn on her thumb. We're at the Club Creole. Willie notices that she has this mark on the inside between her thumb and her forefinger. And she says the mark of Zahn, which is a religion on the visitor homeworld, an outlawed religion that promotes peace. That's not a bad introduction. It's something that gets brought up a few more times. Though, again, we're starting to go further away from the initial analogy of fascism and the kind of grounded science fiction. And also now we're getting to fantasy and chosen ones, because reportedly there is a chosen one that can defeat the visitors from the Zahn religion, and Elizabeth has the mark that supposedly might indicate that she is the chosen one of sorts. And chosen one's a time classic sci-fi fantasy trope, but it seemed a little bit off here. It seemed like we were diving far out of the reach of what was initially intended for the show. Luckily, it's not used that often. It's brought up once or twice more, but it never fully developed. Kind of in a way, it's a good thing, to be honest, especially because it just seems so weird. There's a religion that has a prophecy about defeating the visitors, but it's their religion. Like, it doesn't make much sense. I mean, defeating the leader, a tyrannical leader, I guess it could work. I just never really liked it too much. I did like the religion angle itself. It's kind of always cool to see more culture from the visitors' side. But And again, it's also like Willie. Willie is also somewhat of a deus ex machina at times in terms of whenever they need anything from the visitor side. There's Willie. He's a construction factory worker and also knows how to help Robin at pregnancy in the final battle. Now knows all about this religious sect. It just seems like he's always there to help out with any kind of jack of all trades with the alien culture and things of that nature. But it's fine. It's something you can kind of get used to. That's the end of the episode. Anything else in there? Oh, I wish you had the stock footage count. There's some more stock footage in the in the episode this time when the aliens return and start the invasion again. There is a skyfighter shooting the country that's shooting down the city, taken partially from the final battle, and also there's a segment where humans and Jeep are throwing bombs on the skyfighter, which is exactly footage from the original miniseries when they talk about the raid on Sean Donovan's town, where they start fighting back against the aliens. It's taken directly from it, so it's more stock footage. That's one of that. So nothing of the Skyfighter fight for the original miniseries, but that's what I get here. So the end of the episode, it's a good episode as a whole. I'd give it a C average, C plus maybe. It's not devolved yet. There's some hokiness to it. You can see where the hokiness could get, but so far it's still not too bad yet. I will say the one last thing I will say, I bring up the open city concept that is actually a good idea on paper. It does actually harken back to the allegory of World War II, having the open city. However, in execution, it comes off a little not so great story-wise, because it basically what it does just takes away the fear of the aliens. There's no more visitors around. If we're all going to walk around, then what's the point? Then it's not, you're not scared of visitors if there's an open city. I mean, you are to a degree, but it just seems to lessen the threat. So I'm not sure it ends up working as well as you think it would. But that's the case of this whole series. I see what they're going for. Just work on execution. So let's move on now to the character database. Go back to the pictures. This is the Maxwell. We're going to go through all the Maxwells. As we know, as Robert passed away, it seems like a good time to do that. The first one we'll go with alphabetical order is Elizabeth Maxwell. We have a lot of pictures of her because she has a lot of different places. She has a lot of different ages and looks. This was from the original when she was born in the final battle when she was born. She quickly shed her skin initially and became a toddler really quickly. Then she jumped to about 6 or 7 years old and reached her as an 8-year-old, where this is where at the end, well, at least physiologically an 8-year-old, this is where she was in the final battle, where she became the Jedi for the first time, I'd like to say. And this is where she is the beginning of the weekly series until she hits the cocoon. And then she becomes the older female that we know and love for the rest of the weekly series. She's portrayed by the child, I don't know the actor's name for that, the toddler with Brandy Gold, the 8-year-old physiologically Jenny Beck, and this, of course, is Jennifer Cook, probably also best known for Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives, which is a good one. I like that one. Elizabeth does appear in the final battle and pretty much all throughout the series. 5 of the books, throughout a lot of the comic books. She's a lot of different adventures. You're going to find Elizabeth becomes more and more involved in a weird love triangle as we move forward. We'll get to the weekly series. We'll get to that. She becomes more and more reliant on her powers. They come and go, but at the end, it was going to get worse and worse. If you read about the finale that they never filmed, but what they were planning for season 2, which we'll get there again, seemed more a little out of the ordinary. She was not in the second generation at all, but Robin's unknown baby was mentioned, so it's probably her. But she was a okay character. She had some interesting points. Just got to be a little bit much sometimes as far as the powers went. So next up, we have Elizabeth's clone. There's an episode, a weekly series, where Diana tries to replicate what we had with Elizabeth, especially because Elizabeth always seems to foil her. It doesn't make much sense, but Sam Jenny Beck, that's her at that age, and she does the same thing, and she gets to be older as she goes through her own cocooning, so to speak. So same as Jenny Beck and Jennifer Cook again, but it's only one episode that lasts before they move on from that. but she's technically part of the Maxwells, right? The clone. Next, we have Kathleen Maxwell, portrayed by Penelope Windus. She was only in the original miniseries. If you remember, she was killed during the attack on the mountain camp, trying to defend her family after Robert had to make the difficult decision to choose between them and Robin. And he chose to give up the location of the base in hopes that he could get the family out before the visitors attacked. But Kathleen lost her life during that segment. Next up, we have Katie Maxwell. She was the youngest daughter, I should say, of Robert and Kathleen, sister to Polly and Robin. She's in the original and the final battle. However, she did not make the jump to the weekly series, which made sense to me. They said in the storyline that she moved to a aunt in Chicago, though I can't remember if that was actually in the book. I think it might have been in a book. Not necessarily said in the TV show. I'm not certain. I don't remember it being said unless I missed it. Seems a little weird that Robert sends his daughters away while he raises Robin and the granddaughter, but that's the excuse they made. Next up is Polly Maxwell, the middle child, the more tomboyish character, played by Vivica Davis. Same scenario. She's in the original and the final battle as part of the Maxwell clan. Doesn't do much except to ooh and ah and talk to Robin a few times. She too supposedly goes with Katie to the aunt's house in Chicago. Next up is Robert Maxwell. He is in the original miniseries. He is in the final battle, and he's in the first 2 episodes of the weekly series. He does make it into the couple of the novels as well. This is the episode, like I said, where he sacrifices himself. Which lines to some. I think it's a good sacrifice. If they had to cut down characters so early, he's not a bad choice to make. As he doesn't really have a lot to do at this point, except for raising Elizabeth, and then without him, it becomes much more interesting where Elizabeth's going to go, where Robin's going to go, how they're going to deal. Interestingly enough, though, we went on Kennedy Johnson when he wrote the book, The Second Generation, and retconned a lot of the final battle in the weekly series. He chose specifically to have Robert be alive 20 years later, although he's not very active in the resistance. He's behind the scenes doing videos about their real, true reptilian natures. So he's helping out the resistance still. So that's an interesting turn of events there for Robert. And of course, you got Robin, played by Blair Tefkin. She is the biggest, most not well-known, popular, she was in the most episodes or most media of the V franchise in the original Final Battle. The first 12 episodes of the series, she does leave midway through. She's one who did not survive the budget. There's a big budget cut in the middle of the series. We lose a lot of characters and they try to tighten up ship as the ratings are falling. She's in some of the books. She's in a few of the comics, especially one that actually got to include her continuing adventures. She is daughter of Robert and Kathleen, and she is a brat. Valley Rat in the original and the miniseries. She grows up a little bit during the weekly series, especially when Elizabeth gets older. Still has her problems. It's not exactly the most fun character to watch, I'm not going to admit. But she does have some good moments and nothing like that. Although she mostly just comes off very bratty a lot of the times. Interesting fact about Robin is that Dominique Dunn was originally intended to play the character in the miniseries until she was brutally murdered by a crazy ex-boyfriend at the time. That opened the character up for Blair Tefkin to play. And then finally, in the I should note that in the Second Generation book by Kennedy Johnson, she had given birth to the hybrid and went into shock. Not clear. They don't really make clear what happens to her there. She's not really in the Second Generation. And finally, the unnamed baby Maxwell, Elizabeth's twin, who dies pretty early on due to exposure to the red dust. That's what happens to him. So that's the end of the character database there. And that's the end of the episode, pretty much. Next week, we'll get into the 3rd episode, which is an interesting one, because it wasn't actually originally shown during the initial run of the series due to possibly being too violent, but it also led to an interesting case where characters had to be introduced and then reintroduced in the 4th episode. So it was an interesting call. That's something we'll get into tomorrow. If you did like this video, hit like and thumbs up and hit subscribe So make sure you always get the chance to watch the PLD Views or PLD 1138. It's my Star Wars show. We'll be developing some other material soon, arranging how some things are shown. We're going to have a live stream show as well as a Harris Stanza show. Let's see how it all goes down. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments. All right. And as always, I salute you. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at Paul_Newsio. You can also find me on Class Action on the Action Industries YouTube channel and on Call to Action, the Movie Trivia Schmodown podcast. Otherwise, I'm happy to have you aboard. Take care of yourselves. And as always, pray Tanama.